All right. Well, welcome everyone. We're just kind of starting to get to know each other, and I think a couple people had issues logging in, so we're just giving a couple minutes for people to join us. Maybe Jason inside the People Forward Network community send out a quick message and let them know we're live. Ashley maybe on LinkedIn throwing out that same link, just letting them know that we're live and where the link is. I know a number of people are on their way to joining us, so really excited about our event today, and whether it is morning or afternoon, wherever you are. So excited that you're here with us and taking an hour with us and some amazing, incredible speakers, mentors to learn from today. So I'm Nikki Lewallen Gregory, and today's conversation, it's a really important one. I think all of us that have registered know that, and why we have registered. The world is loud. Things are happening really fast. It is pretty darn overwhelming out there. And leaders, we have a lot of pressure to keep it all together, but also need to make sure that our cup stays filled and we're not just relying on the, hey, we're doing our best to be intentional about our leadership efforts, but also that we are very aware of what it is that we're doing when we're taking action. Intentions never enough, but definitely helps to keep that momentum going. But really the awareness of what is the best next step in these challenging situations. It's not about perfection, but definitely getting more guidance from the mentors we have today as we navigate a tough world, right? And leading that tough world. So got some note takers coming in here. I wanted to share just a quick personal story before I turn it over and introduce our guests. So, have you ever had a time where, a dear friend makes an introduction for you? I was on a trip with my friend Rachel Downey, who's also in the podcast space, and she made an introduction, or she was telling me about an introduction she wanted to make. She's like, man, this guy, he like runs this global communications organization with like all of these top brands in the world, any brand you can basically think of that are your favorite brands, and all of the leaders that want to understand how to communicate better externally and internally. I go and look at this website I'd never heard of, OCR Network. I was like, wow, incredible. And we have a passion at People Forward Network to help through podcasting, help to advance those core stories and messages for internal communication. So I'm like, I'd love to talk to him. So all I know is Craig, in this amazing OCR network. And it was one of those days, I'm just kind of like heads down doing a bunch of stuff and had no idea that the Gmail address of this other person that's joining the call that Craig invited happens to be, I'm a very brand loyal person. Like I have, well, wish I could turn my screen around. I have a lot of Apple products here. I love Delta Airlines. I love Costco. And I can't stop talking about certain brands that I love. And this mysterious man that hops on with Craig to talk about this podcast for these leaders in communication just so happens to be Steve Dowling, who spent 16 years as the executive communications leader at Apple. I was like, I'm trying not to lose it right now. One of those times you're like, I'm trying to play it cool. I'm trying to play it cool. But when you have your favorite brands and those that you admire, and then you see the leaders that have done so much to make those companies what they are, wow, it's a nice surprise when that Gmail address turns into somebody that you just really admire. So not only was I already admiring what OCR does and what Craig does, but then, having Steve on the line, and I said, well, how'd you guys meet? This story is killer. It's killer. So I come from a background in running associations, and I believe that associations, like membership communities, can be one of the most powerful ways to invest our time. Relationships are never going away. Relationships, you will never have an AI machine replace relationship building, and we need those key relationships. Well, that's what OCR Network does, right? So I said, how'd you guys meet? Well, Craig says, one day I was just sitting writing an email because I wanted to attract some new people to get involved with OCR Network. And it just so happens that the executive communication leader of Apple is on the list for this email. And he replies to the mass email because it was so powerful of a communication that then Steve replies, and he was like, Craig, I have an extra ticket if you'd want to come to this like Apple unveiling event, for a new product launch or something. And Craig's like, I mean, I sure, has no idea because the guy's a Microsoft follower with the tech that he uses. He converted, by the way, now. But anyways, they meet through this incredible email turned, come to an Apple launch of the next product. And that's just an incredible start. And they become really great friends, corporate collaborators. And then we launched their podcast, Communication Breakdown, that highlights incredible brands, continues to advance the OCR network members, and we'll be dropping the link to Communication Breakdown throughout today so that you can follow that, because I have a feeling that you're going to be a fangirl of both of these guys like me. So I wanted to give that backstory because I just think it's super cool. So Steve Dowling is a strategic strategist, communication strategist, led inside of Apple for 16 years, works alongside OpenAI and has done leadership there. And then the list goes on. But those two very admired yet scrutinized organizations in the world, Apple and OpenAI, it's a pretty big deal. And he brings just this unmatched world perspective, practitioner inside, communication under pressure, mixed with Craig. They kind of have this yin and yang that's super cool. Craig, he's a PhD, the founder of OCR, which is actually Observatory on Corporate Reputation. It is a global research network, like brings together the coolest brands. You have to look them up. These two together, co-hosts of Communication Breakdown, and they agreed to partner with us here at PeopleForward Network to dive into this very important topic area as we close out the year. How do we communicate and lead when things are just tough, fiery, and every day feels like the next surprise? It's like anybody else, like I just don't want to be surprised anymore. What's happening tomorrow? So today we're going to learn from their foundational principles. Each of them have kind of a different way of coming at communication. Mostly we'll lean in on internal communication today, but it's also going to reflect external PR as well. We're going to present some scenarios. I'm going to kind of play host with them and throw out some scenarios and get their dynamic feedback. And if you can jot down any questions or scenarios you have, we're going to have some time to bring those in. I'm sure we won't be able to get to all of them. So when you throw those in the chat, I bet we'll have an opportunity for Craig and Steve to get back to you in another way if we can't get it all in today. And I'll spend 2 minutes at the end just wrapping up with some cool little closing pieces. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my friends, Craig and Steve. You get to see this amazing dynamic duo here. I'd love to start with this, guys, sharing the fundamentals of like the way you see the world of communication and like what grounds your strategy or responses to how you teach leaders your best practices in leadership communication. Turning it over to you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for that fantastic introduction. And it's really exciting to be a part of this community. We've been connected with Nikki for almost probably about a year now, and been learning about the PeopleForward Network through Jason and others. So we're really happy to be here today. I will be interested to hear what Craig says in response to this question as well. And that's one of the great things about our podcast and our relationship, I think, is that I'm always learning from Craig. We come at things from different points of view. We don't disagree terribly often, but our perspectives are often different, and it's interesting to see where they overlap. I think to answer your question about first principles, Nikki, I come to it from a place of values. And by values, I mean, what are the things that we really want to convey to people bigger than the words or even the concepts. And so I think about communicating those across all of the functions that you have that are communications. And, there are the major ones that we look at with, employee meetings and emails across, the entire company. But there's also the one-on-ones, and there's also events, and there's also how we present our company externally. So I look at things to focus on like authenticity, which I think is really, really important. And transparency is a part of that. And how transparent, can you be, and how comfortable are you being transparent about what you're doing and why you're doing it, and then how you present yourself, and all of the decisions that go into that are really fascinating to me. But I try to bring it all back to what are the values that you, as a group, as an individual, as a company, are trying to convey. What are the things that motivate and drive you, and that are really the foundations of your company, of your organization.
Wow, we're already going to have different points of view. I'm gonna back up, kind of do like the same intro as what Steve did, because it's we sometimes think about the podcast as being like the odd couple because of our different points of view. So I'll kind of give a little bit of a frame on that a little bit. My background is that of being a professor teaching communications for 20 years, but largely from a research point of view. So I don't have, Steve having, 16 years at Apple. What I do is I talk to people like Steve and his peers, and I, have a standard practice of where I meet with two of them every single day of the week. And for me, that's the most important metric. And I will take those insights and I'll carry it forward every 90 days. So I would say Steve is an N of one. He's a sample of one, but he's got that in-depth longitudinal experience from one company, day in, day out, battle tested, trial and error, figure it out, learn from yourself, keep learning and improving. But it's that longitudinal course and sense of identity running through it all. I don't have that. Mine is I do surveys, and that's really how I met Steve. It was responded on one of the surveys that I do of chief communications officers, and so my view is like a macro view of like I'll take like Steve's experience accumulated over 16 years. And I'll look at it like at one point in time where I might not have like that one in depth of one person, but kind of combining and curating and collating across all of them together develop like a macro view. Um, so that's kind of the difference. One of the differences there is that he's very like deep, from very the continuity of yourself over time and building and refining. And I'm kind of taking a little bit from a lot of different people because I haven't been out there in the I would say I'm out there in the trenches now that we've started the OCR network, but at least while I was a professor is more like kind of sitting on the sidelines and observing people like Steve in the role. But to the point of like the question, the framework for me, in teaching communications, my own philosophy of communications that guides everything is I'm a huge fan of acronyms, as you'll discover over the next hour, and models. But my primary model is I call it the CPR triangle for claims, perceptions, and reality. And the idea behind these three as the triangle here is that everything that we're doing in communications, it's all about those three. It's what you say, what you do, and what you believe, and the interconnections between the three. We could talk about the say-do gap or the say-believe gap or the believe-do gap, but the three of them together, that sense of alignment and convergence, to me, everything in communications comes down to being able to connect the points, those 3 points, and you want the triangle to be as small as possible. And the further the further away that those points on the triangle are, the more you're going to have narrative drift, and the more you're going to be stretching yourself, stretching the imagination, and the more that you, as an entrepreneur, as a leader, as a visionary, the more that you can do to think intentionally about having a point of view about all three of those, then the more clear you're going to be.
I think what that comes down to, and hopefully the intersection with what I'm talking about with values, is integrity, right? Consistency over time, and consistency with what you stand for and living up to that, and also
Yeah.
how you're communicating it. So I think there's good overlap here with Craig's acronyms and my maybe fluffy concepts, but I think it does come down to being consistent over time, and as you do, but things do change,
Yeah.
and being consistent with your values as things change, and bringing your audience along, whether that's an external population of customers or whether it's an internal population of employees, is like bringing them along for the changes and making sure that you're focused on that consistency, and helping them identify that as well.
I like the fluffy side that you mentioned there. For me, my goal is to take Steve's fluffiness and draw a picture with it, turn it into a diagram, right? Like take his that fluffy concept there and see if we can turn that into the triangle. So I'm going to hit on Steve, what you just said about the integrity there. You know, where the triangle helps me to come into play is to think, okay, integrity, we can actually put it on the triangle between the say and the do, between the claim and the reality. And this is I got this idea from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of the best descriptions I've ever read about getting the heart about what's the difference between honesty and integrity. And so honesty is having your words match having your claims match reality. Okay. For honesty, reality comes first, and then your claims match what the reality is. You say what is true. Integrity is the opposite. You start with your claim and then you make it so, like Captain Picard in Star Trek, right? So the integrity is, you're taking you're taking your words like a promise, and then you're making it a reality, if you will. So that's how, so it's a sequencing thing
Love
for
that.
honesty and integrity. With honesty, reality is first, followed by your words matching reality, and integrity is your words starting first and then making reality match your words.
So
Well, I
with
think
some of these scenarios that we are going to share today, so I brought like kind of stories of situations happening. Do you think it's fair to say that with a lot of these foundational principles, now you'll be able to illustrate it in your replies probably? Like here's what that looks like, the say and the do or whatever. Or do you want to go in deeper now to give more color so that people can really understand? Or do you think we'll do it through the scenarios?
Well, yeah, we'll go whatever direction you want to go. It's like
Okay.
jazz. I'm going to play
All
off
right.
Steve.
We'll do the examples, but I do have one more question. I'll put you
Sure.
guys on the spot for a second because I just thought about this. I like to ask mentors like you in this certain sweet spot, what if you had to unlearn? What is the most important lessons that you have to unlearn in order to, on the other side, be who you want to be as a leader who's communicating with excellence and doing it for ultimate meaning, right? And impact.
Oh, I've
Anything
got a
come to
great
mind?
answer for that. Ideas are a dime a dozen. This is something I learned from some of my former students at NYU. As professors, we like acronyms, we like frameworks, and it's very easy to get caught up in your ideas to say, oh, somebody's taken my idea, but the reality is ideas are a dime a dozen. It's all about the implementation, right? It
Mhm.
doesn't, anyone can have ideas, anyone can take your idea, but it's how you bring your idea to life that matters. So not getting so caught up in your ideas that even as an entrepreneur, as a leader, as a manager, you can create this great vision, you can have a great strategy, but at the end of the day, it's about the execution and the operation and making it real in people's lives. And until it's real in people's lives, it's just a theory.
yeah, no, I feel like I'm unlearning all the time and like learning and unlearning all the time. And there's a comment in the chat that I saw that relates to this, which is that leaders don't need to know everything and have all the answers. I think about it in terms of the audience and really like forcing myself to recognize and let go of preconceived notions or biases or even my perspective when I'm thinking about how a message or a specific communication is going to land with an audience. And you really have to figure out like what assumptions am I bringing to my read of this situation, and how do I let go of that, and what assumptions will the audience bring, right?
Mm.
So there's a learning and an unlearning there. But when I think about your question, Nikki, I think about that as just like an ongoing process of putting yourself in the audience's shoes, looking at things from their perspective, or doing your best to do that. And what do you have to let go of
Yeah.
to achieve that?
I'm going to push that idea further to say how hard it is to do that. And that, like later in life, I'm realizing that it's always going to be a constant question that you're having to ask yourself, and you're never figuring it out today. Does not mean that you've got to figure it out tomorrow, that you always have to keep that alive, because a lot of times we are our own audience. And a lot of times, like whether you're thinking about communicating through chaos or through crisis or trying to inspire a group. It's like remembering, okay, who is it that you're really trying to reach there? Or are we just talking to ourselves? You
And I
know?
think it requires a humility too. Like it
Yeah.
requires this humility almost as a skill,
Mhm.
because you have to
Muscle. I'll say
recognize.
muscle. I'll
There
add
you
to
go.
that.
That's
Muscle.
the better way to put it. It's why he's the professor. But I think that having humility as you approach these situations, because your audience is diverse in one way or another, and you have to account for that, and you have to figure out how to reach them effectively. And again, letting go of your biases and perspective is an important step there.
Really good. Anyone else that has an unlearning, please throw it in the chat, because I feel like this, what we learn is powerful. What we unlearn might be even more powerful, right? And sometimes some tough lessons. But Jason Cochran, shout out. Yes, this is so powerful. Communication for shared understanding, like, is about them, not me, right? And so we have to write for the people, the reader. One little quick foundational tip, and I'm by no means the mentor on here, just thought I would share, is that in my younger years, I learned DISC, and I've always gone deeper and deeper in understanding like DISC profile. So I have an automatic habit of understanding, like if I'm just talking to somebody one-on-one, understanding who I think they are so I can speak that. If I don't know, if once I do know, I'm definitely going to speak into that. But when I write a mass communication, I think all four styles, and that really helps me. It's just one of my automatic habits. Thought I'd throw that out.
Okay, I'll add
Yeah,
something
Craig.
here based on some observations here. I see like Jason
Yeah.
Cochran writing about shared understanding. For
Mhm.
me, it's also helpful, and I still struggle with it. So even though I'm sharing it, this is still a constant learning and unlearning, is understanding that there's like three different outcomes with communications. It's like building awareness, building understanding, and taking action. And, and so I think it's always keeping in mind, what is the end goal that we're trying to accomplish? Are we trying to simply make them aware? Are we trying to build consensus and get them to understand and accept a particular point of view or to develop their own? Or are we trying to get to, encourage them to do something with it, to take a particular action or inspire them to develop whatever that action is and then let us know? But any of our communications is going to have that implicit, and we have to be explicit and aware as the author of a message, like, okay, did this message go far enough? Is this the end goal? Is like, am I just trying to make him aware of something, or am I really trying to, inspire action in some particular way?
James Fleming dropping bombs. Thank you. These are good ones. Thank you so much. All right. So I think we're going to roll right into this fireside chat time. We're already kind of fireside chatting, but scenarios that I'm going to throw out and then get Craig and Steve's perspective on these. What I would love to make sure of is we want to save a little bit of time for you to share a scenario, you to share a question. I don't know if we'll get to all of them. Jot yours down, because when we're ready, you can throw them in the chat. So for right now, I think I've got like 2 or 3 I'm going to throw out just to kind of get us started here. So Craig and Steve, are you ready?
Mhm.
Ready for these?
Ready as we'll ever be.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Here we go. All right. So let's say, so this company, they have 8,000 employees. So they are facing an industry shifting announcement, and employees are panicked, and the media is, popping up everywhere about it. Leadership chooses to stay silent for about 2 weeks. And the reason why is because they're waiting until they have more clarity. But by the time they speak 2 weeks in, the fear and the rumors and all of this is it's just rolling, right? So comment everywhere in this, but I mean, where is strategic? Where is silence strategic and where is it destructive? I think is the main question, but comment away. Who wants to take it?
Craig, do you want to start? I know we spend a lot of time on our podcast talking about silence, which is interesting. It's in some ways it's a podcast about silence, but I'll defer to Craig for the first go.
Yeah, all right. I'll start off with like, waiting until you get clarity. I think that'll never happen. We'll never get clarity. Clarity is something you generate. clarity is a decision-making process. And I think a lot of times we don't own that. Or we haven't been very clear on that even as a field of field of communications, is that there's a lot of effort and a lot of this is why I love acronyms so much in models, is that it's how I generate clarity. But it's a decision-making and sense-making process. That's where I would start. Um, so until you've gone through that sense-making process, you really don't know. But I'd say that's the danger with even trying to assess what is silence and what counts as silence, because there should still be that internal thinking and reflecting internally about what's going on. And that a lot of times companies are dealing with these processes internally, even though externally we might not see it, or even internally your lower level employees might not know that you're wrestling with these questions. I'll pause there. I'm sure Steve's already got a little to go with.
No, I mean, I think that the thing is about, and Nikki, in your example or scenario here, another company has made this announcement, right? And you're sort of in a reactive posture, right? And your employees are wondering, like, what does this mean for us? And so I think there's a balance here, and that this silence is a component of, but it's not. It doesn't sound like the silence is intentional, because if silence is intentional and strategic, that's one calculation. You have to be, you have to be thoughtful about how you do that. If you're in a position where you don't know what to say, right, and then I think that silence is you're tolerating, or you're managing silence. You don't want to be silent, and I think that in a lot of situations where there's chaos, where there's you really don't have your answer prepared. Silence may be the most disciplined option, right? Because you say, like, we're not going to go out and wing it. We need to be quiet. But I think that you need to manage that quickly, because silence becomes destructive, because it starts to reflect and be perceived as hesitation or paralysis, right? And sometimes that's an accurate interpretation, which I think is the what we're breaking down in this scenario. So I think there's a danger in letting silence go on too long, that it starts to look like indifference or capitulation, like to some situation. And so you need to figure out how to communicate what you can, so that you maintain that conversation with your audience, with your employees in this case. And sometimes you have to go out and say, we don't know all the answers, but we're working on it, but we're looking at it, and to try to figure out how you can explain with enough transparency and authenticity, as I said, where you are. And you can always, I think my go-to in these situations is, you can always talk about the things that you do know and that are within your control. You can always talk about yourself, your principles, your values, your strengths. And yes, sometimes that, helps you buy a little time, but it's also a reassurance factor. And if you're in a situation where you're not saying anything because there's uncertainty or possibly paralysis, I think it's good to break out of that. And that's one thing that you can go to in those situations.
Yeah, for me, I feel like it's important to go a step further back and make sure that you can at least put it on paper, know what you think. And I will use that CPR triangle. Okay, what you like? Okay, what are people expecting me to say, or what do I want to say? I'll start there. What do I want to say? Okay, what do I believe about this? What do my employees believe? What do our stakeholders believe about this? What is the reality going on the ground floor right now around us? And does what we say, does our historical reality match this, or are we looking for a future reality? But I would kind of work through whatever it is that I'm dealing with to develop a point of view from all three. Like, okay, what am I prepared to say or not say? What do I believe? What do our stakeholders believe? And what's the ground floor truth out there today before even deciding whether or not I'm going to speak, or that we're going to speak together as a group. There's I think a lot of companies don't take that internal moment ahead of time. They're so ready to wrestle with the question of, am I going to speak out or not? Do I have something to say, or am I just going to say something? Well, you gotta take that internal time to get clear with your internal leadership team and clear with your employees about what that is before you venture out there.
I think it's a good opportunity to think about what fear does to us as a human. So in this case, right, it's like it's a fear situation. People are panicking, and you've heard the statistics around how quickly someone can go from engaged to disengaged. And give them a weekend, and they're on the job search, and they have all this validation from family members on why they need to be out of here, right? Like it's a really slippery slope not to do even if we don't know what to say yet, at least providing something that helps to, lessen that fear. Because,
Yeah.
telephone game can get out of control,
Yeah.
and we don't want to lose great people. So yeah, I
Well, I
think great
think
points
part
there.
of this here is, and we really haven't said this out loud yet, but part of it is, but since you said fear, that's where I'm going to go. We're, even when you're thinking about what you want to say, we have to be super clear about what we want. Like, and sometimes we're so fixated on goals that we miss the point that goals are about what is it that why are you in business? Why does your company exist? Why are you here? What is it that you want to do? What is it that you want to be about before you even get into the question of what you're going to say? And when you're dealing with it from an employee perspective, that's even more important, right? If your employees are full of angst or they're fearful, it's getting clear on okay, what do you want? What do they want right now? What do you not want? What do they not want right now? And what is standing in the way right now? Right? And so as you're thinking about this feeling of fear in your body, it's getting clear on why am I fearing? Why am I feeling fearful? Right? And a lot of times that fear is because we're not super clear on our ultimate purpose, our ultimate what is it that we want. If we get clear on what we want, what we don't want, and what immediately stands in the way, a lot of times through the lens of values, that's gonna take us a long way there and help your employees deal with this moment of fearfulness.
Well, and to build on what Craig is saying there, I think a lot of this stuff, a lot of the things, the concept, the Craig's talking about, these are things that people should already know, ideally, right? Because they're part of the company. They've heard it from you before. They should have anyway. And so ideally, it's reinforcement in this situation. But to get there, companies need to develop this muscle. They need to be good at telling their own story and reinforcing it internally and making sure that everybody is on the same page, so that if you get to a moment of crisis or potential indecision or something that is shaking the foundation of trust, you have something to go back to. So I think this is a really good reason why companies need to be telling their story and reinforcing their story in their own way, in a way that becomes familiar. And again, consistency over time, so that if you get to this spot, you have something to go back to and people don't feel like they're suddenly without a net, right? They've got a foundation beneath them.
I'm going to pull that even one step further backward. It's like before you can tell your story, you got to know what that story is. And a lot of times we're so ready to story tell that it might not be the best story to tell. We need to get clear whether it's our origin story or whatever it is, but thinking about it from the perspective of being very intentful about what your story is and what's the heart of the story and what's the central aspect, what are the turning points, but what makes this such a spectacular story right now beforehand. And sometimes we have to go back to our roots to rethink what our story is or what's the core story.
I would just one additional point, Nikki, based on the scenario that you had brought up, and you're talking about, the telephone game and what people are hearing from their family members or outside the workplace over that weekend. Like, if you as a company, if you as an organization are not telling your story, the chances are somebody else will. If you leave a gap, someone's going to fill it in. And that's something you need to be, aware of all the time.
Yeah.
That's so good. Well, can you see why these guys have taken off as podcast hosts? Because they're just like back and forth. Oh, let me go a little deeper. Let me take it a step. Let me rewind that for a second. You guys are naturals together, by the way. I know you know that, but it's really good. So let's dig into clarity further. And I really want to highlight through this scenario the difference between communication volume. Because you hear some people say, oh, but you got to just keep communicating it. Okay, yes, but communication volume and communication clarity, right? And kind of the mix of that. So this company scenario, they have really strong KPIs, really clear, the outcomes that individuals are working towards. But at the same time, morale, just the vibe is going downwards. It's just, you can just feel it. And the frustration that's heard a lot is we get so many emails, Slack is blowing up. Yes, we're doing the town halls, we're doing all the things, but what are like the clarity, like all these different comments around, but where are we going or why or whatever. So can you talk about that, like the over communicating, but mixed with the need for it, the volume not being helpful unless the clarity is there? Let's go deeper on that.
Well, I'll jump in with something anecdotal, and then Craig will show up with a framework that hopefully will make sense of it. I think that Craig said it earlier, you need to have something to say, right? And if you are out there just talking for the sake of talking, or you have a weekly email because you have a weekly email, people are going to see through that, right? There's got to be substance, there's got to be value to your communication. And I think that if you're dealing with a situation of uncertainty, then you need to understand how you are improving people's understanding and identify the need. But what you're talking about is just people are they just feel overwhelmed. And if they feel overwhelmed, I think then you probably have to look at your processes and go, why does this come across as noise? Right? What are the concerns that we're hearing, and how do we address them? And I think this is one of the principles of good communications in any scenario, is that it needs to be two-way communication. You need to be getting that feedback and understanding the audience needs, but taking a step back periodically, hopefully before complaints like this mount, and say, let's look at the cadence of how we're communicating. Let's look at the channels through which we're communicating with people. This, especially outside of work, with social media and all the other inputs that they have, it may not be you that's overwhelming them necessarily, but they may feel overwhelmed for other reasons, and you're piling onto it. So I think trying to figure out where you fit into your audience's communication diet, for lack of a better term, like is something to be aware of, and think, do we need to be communicating with them during a certain period of time? Should we be looking outside of certain times? What is the right way to reach them? Like, do people want to be bombarded by certain channels, text or social media or whatever? Do we need people following us on whatever platform? Is email even an effective way to reach them? I think there's lots of different things to assess in how people are perceiving what they're receiving from you, and you have to really take a step back and try to assess all of the factors.
I'm going to build on that right there at that moment, right? You're doing all that assessment, and now it's a moment to think about assessing yourself. Maybe your people will tell you, but you want to make sure that you've got it. You're calm, cool, and collected yourself, right? It's important to have all your channels laid out, to be clear about what messages you're going to send. But part of that process is, are you part of the problem, right? Or are you part of the solution? And no matter how good you think you are at communications and creating a vision, and you've got your talking points down, and you know what channels that you're going to use, and you've got your strategy laid out, if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not in good health, if you don't have good mental health yourself, good physical health, if you're not taking care of yourself and your own personal priorities, everyone else is going to see it and you're going to become part of the message there. So they're going to evaluate what you're saying against what you are believing based on who you're showing up to be at that particular moment. And I think I'm a little late in life in realizing just how important that is. A great book on that called Coherence. The subtitle something about the science of leadership. I remember buying that book on Amazon, thinking it was a book about, well, coherence and leadership. And it wasn't. It was a book about personal health, right? You bought it off Amazon and it was a completely different description. You open it up, and in the forward of the book is, you think this book is about leadership. It's not. It's about your personal health. And if you don't get your act together, your heart, your health, your nutrition, your blood, your physiology, then the impact of these things on your own personal life is going to transmit to everybody else around you, and you're going to put them in a state of chaos. And I thought, wow, that was pretty interesting, and it was pretty powerful. It's written by a physiologist in London. I got to know him after the book came out, and his practice was based on CEOs. He was a heart doctor, and he just got so tired of having his clients die on them, right? Or if they survived, they were actually pretty evil people, and they're just. It's like, why is it the bad ones living? I don't know, but he turned it into a practice of like helping companies that by getting their personal health in order, that would permeate the organization. So he used that as a source of like transmitting clarity and coherence through the organization by starting with the personal health of the people at the top.
We've talked about this on the podcast before, and I've used the same example, but people here probably haven't heard it. In our family, we got it from the announcement that when you're on the plane and it says, if you're traveling with a child, put your own mask on first. Yeah. And for every parent, that's like completely counterintuitive. You're like, why would I prioritize my own well-being over my child? But you're no good to them if you're not, in good shape yourself. I think just to follow up on Nikki and your scenario here, it reminds me of a term that I've come to embrace, which is engagement. I always hear about people like, talk about engagement. And I've always thought of it as like a social media metric or whatever. But people can be receiving every single email or Slack, whatever that you're getting, and they may still not be engaged. And it's really about what feedback are you getting, and are you communicating with them in a way that is engaging them? And I don't mean in a like just attention grabbing way, but is it meaningful, to your earlier point, right? Is it respectful of their time? Is it in a format and through a channel that fits for them? And so I like to think of it as being engaging with communications. And that may not mean as many or as fast or in a certain format. But I think those are the sort of factors that you have to be measuring.
I really want to contextualize that a little bit more because it is so freaking important and it cannot be underscored enough. Like, thinking about like how we've been teaching communications for 50 years. Like today, it's very easy to take that idea of engagement for granted. But the core ideas that the communication field was built on in terms of like when it became a function within organizations was out of a book that was published in 1970 called Exit, Voice, or Loyalty. And those are your 3 points of view. You either spoke up, okay, or you kept your mouth shut and you did what was told of you, which was demonstrating loyalty, or you left. And none of those three options are great anymore. And this one about engagement was not one that was on the table 50 years ago. And today, it's so easy to take that for granted, and we think maybe we talk about it so much that we don't understand how foundational it is and how transformative it can be, and it can be the very thing. So I'm going to say it's the fourth option. It's the way. It's no longer exit. Voice is important, loyalty is important, but you got to find a way during these moments of when there's a lack of clarity, when there's a lack of coherence, when there's a lot of fear, when there's a lot of volatility. This idea of engagement can create the journey that you need with your employees to keep moving forward when it's so easy to be bottlenecked or to be stalled or to be paralyzed in your steps.
Well, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm like, I'm only into scenario 2 and we're like almost out of time. I can't not bring up this one other scenario. So I'm going to challenge Craig and Steve to be very brief on this one so I can take a couple of audience questions here. But with Steve's leadership with OpenAI, we can't go in the we can't end this without an AI topic real quick. It might be coming in from you guys too, but let's think through this for a second with me. And I just lost oh yes. Okay. So AI and the machine or voice problem, right? Well, a comms team starts using AI to scale communication and messages, they become super polished. It's like, wow, that is good. But they're generic and employees are like, this feels like ChatGPT. Leaders are losing their authentic voice. I think this is happening a lot, right? So just real quick, we're going to hear from Steve. I'm going to have you kick off, and then Craig, you comment, and then we're going to take a couple audience and head out of here. What are your thoughts on this?
I have so many. AI, I mean, you said it earlier, Nick, I think at the beginning, you said that no AI is going to replace relationships. And I think that AI is a tool, first off. That's my rule of thumb. That's my first answer whenever AI comes up. AI is a tool. It's a really powerful tool, and it has a lot of potential that has not yet been realized, we assume. But it's doing some interesting things right now. And I think when it comes to communication, the things that we think of as generative AI, the output, will it write a poem? Will it write an essay? Whatever, draw me a picture. I think that's all great. It's interesting. It makes a heck of a party trick. But as you've identified, it's really risky. And I think that when we think about AI for communications, I think the more reliable, anyway, value is the ability of the AI models to understand what we want, not just like putting out stuff that sounds like a person wrote it, but understanding really complex instructions across huge volumes of text, and the summarization abilities are really remarkable. But when it comes to communicating, like, AI needs source material to draw on, and so I think it's a good companion. It's a good like thought partner, maybe. It might be good for helping you with a rough draft. I've heard of companies who are using AI models to draw on that source material, like everything their CEO has ever written or spoken, that it can maybe start to help in generating drafts. But I think, as you identify, like, we've all seen the shortcomings when it comes to writing, and you can kind of tell when people are leaning on it. And I think that audiences can tell when people are leaning on it, and therefore audiences are on the lookout for it. And yeah, if you want to like talk about a credibility killer, getting caught using ChatGPT for anything, let alone something that's really important and supposed to be personal, is pretty bad, maybe fatal. So I think that AI is still seen sort of as a shortcut that people don't respect others using, certainly in situations like this. So I would think about its applications as a tool for the writer, not for the writing output. I would think about it as a tool for analysis, but it's not going to make decisions. It's not going to set priorities for you. It's got to be a tool that you use to do your job.
So good. Thank you. Craig?
Yeah, I think, okay, that is the current reality. That's where we're at right now. We just had a conference here in New York a couple of days ago with 30 of Steve's peers from this network of chief comms officers. And so we've just recently had this moment to reflect on this idea of AI as a tool. And what I see going on right now is that it is a tool, because we have not learned how to think about, and we've not had the time or the discipline or the vision to sit there to turn it into a system. And so, because we haven't, we're not there yet. So it's probably not the conversation to have. Okay. But for those entrepreneurs, those leaders who are able to think about AI in a much more creative way, there is a future path, but that's just not where we're at today. So I'll just have to restrict the comments to AI as a tool. I think, first of all, no matter what you believe about AI at this particular moment, you're right. It's that, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. But if you can create a vision of what's possible or how you want to use it, you can expand. And I use it for thinking about, okay, well, yes, where you want to start with, okay, what do you want and how are you going to use it for this tool? But I have, in many cases, found it very useful for expanding what I want and expanding my vision and expanding the range of what is possible and staircasing and creating next steps as a part of the partner. But if you don't have that vision muscle, okay, and you're not able to architect and scaffold it that way in a very intentional way, then you're in trouble. And everything that Steve just mentioned is those are the real pitfalls that you got to watch out for.
So good. I mean, we could have had an hour just on that one right there. Okay. Okay. Not to turn the heat up or anything, but I'm taking one audience question or scenario. I think this is really good for like new year or end of year, new year, whether it's like, we got to finish and hit our numbers, or it's the beginning of the year and gas down and comp plans have changed and go harder, faster, right? So I'm leaning into that for this question. And this is from Eric. And here's the heat. Craig and Steve, you get 1 minute to reply. 1 minute. Okay. So numbers aren't being hit, yet there is an overall feeling of people being burned out. How do you push for performance without sounding tone deaf? And where's the line between being empathetic and enabling a culture that doesn't deliver?
Wow.
Eric, way to
I have
go.
an answer on that, but Steve, if you have one
No,
that you
go
want to.
for it. I'll apply the
I mean,
framework
first of all,
after
this
your
is
raw
this is the
materials.
moment that So partly it's because of my gathering that I host on Tuesday. This is a group that the OSR Network's conference is one day a year. You can't make it this year. When is it next time? FTOD, first Tuesday of December next year. 11 months behind you. One, where the dust is largely settled on the year. 1 day to check in with your peers, and then 3 weeks to double down, course correct, make any changes before the next year. So this is exactly the moment where everybody is right now. And I would say the answer I would give on this particular question, after going through it for so many years, is that number one, you got to take a moment of pause and reflect and get crystal clear on what your goals are. Like, what is it that you most want to accomplish in the remaining of the year? Because if you're not clear on what you want to accomplish, what you want, what you don't want, and what is immediately standing in the way between now and the end of the year, you're only going to burn out and frustrate your employees. But on the other hand, if you're clear on those three questions there, you can galvanize, mobilize, and inspire even the most burned out employees if you're clear on those three questions.
I think Craig's right. I think my quick response would be that you want to make sure you're providing transparency, right? This is what we're up against. I think you need to be relatable, and that needs to go in two directions, right? You need to demonstrate that you understand how hard the team is working, and that you're being transparent about what the goal is, and that you understand what it's going to take to get there, right? Because I think where you get a disconnect is where you have somebody who seems out of touch telling you to do more about something that they don't really understand. So I think relatability is the other component that I would put in there. And then finally is respect. And you need to express respect for what people are doing. It's not enough to say, I know you're working hard. You need to convey in words or some other way, but start with words, that you respect what people are up against and that they're working hard for these goals that you all share.
Yes, I reinforce that. Yes.
Thank you guys so much. Again, this was so fast. So not to put you on the spot, but would everyone like to have Craig and Steve back again? I feel like we didn't barely scratch the surface. Put a yes in the chat if you'd like to see them again, asking them back. Well, great. We might have some dates for you guys. You guys ready to pull out your calendars?
Let's
Would
do
love
it,
to
and let's
have
do it.
you.
Let's do on this just all audience Q&A.
Yeah,
I
We
love
don't
really.
it.
We could
do
do
I love
that.
too
it.
much of it this
Pure
time.
Q&A. Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, well, that sounds so good. Ashley, put it on our list to talk with Alicia about another event with Craig and Steve. And I think it could almost be a communication breakdown, like live interactive, like not that it I mean, you could use it for your podcast if you want, but let's, just go deep, and people bring the questions in a live format, and we put the brand of communication breakdown down or up there with us. If you haven't followed the show or checked out their show, I think if someone on my team could drop the link again, or anybody, just go ahead and throw that link so that you've got communication breakdown. Really proud of their show, their dynamic, the content. It's a really great podcast. And then I wanted to share that PeopleForward Network is launching a series next year, a flagship event. We'll have 5 of them. It's called Leadership Debates Without Division. We find it's really important right now. There's a lot of division, and we don't need more of it in the workplaces. And so we're going to be having working through tough conversations together. And maybe Craig and Steve, maybe you could come and play referees. That'd be fun. That would be cool. You're like, pull you off to the side. I'm going to take you in another room on Zoom, talk with you a little bit. But
it's good to get practice on that stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of fun. So Leadership Division Without Debates, it's a flagship event where we're going to model how to navigate disagreement with respect, curiosity, and collaboration. We'll have 5 of those next year. And then Chelsea, you have our link for a giving opportunity. So at PeopleForward Network, it's that time of year where there's a lot of giving going on, and we all have something near and dear to our heart. I just wrapped up one of mine on Tuesday night with Purposeful Living, which is a wonderful organization. Chelsea is very passionate about ensuring people get access to healthy food, no matter who you are, no matter, who's at the helm there. Everyone should be getting access to healthy food. And her mom works for an organization that helps to stock those shelves to ensure that. So we have a little team fundraiser that we're in right now that is led by Chelsea, and she's very passionate because of her, passion for health and taking care of people, but also because her mom works at this organization, Gleaners. If you see an opportunity to donate, there's the link. Go ahead and throw it in your follow-up. Would love that. And finally, I feel like I had one more thing for you guys. We're going to be sending out the replay. So we'll send out the replay of this. And if you have questions that didn't get answered or want to reach out directly to Craig and Steve, we'll have their LinkedIn attached to that, so you could reach out directly. Thanks, guys. Craig and Steve, you did a great job. This was so fun. Long time coming.
Thanks very much for having us.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks for having us.
All right.
Absolutely.
See you later,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.